And that's our show.
Thank you for that promo.
Beautiful.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to KDUX Web Radio, broadcast live from Richland College in Dallas, Texas. We are the voice of Richland College. Views expressed on this show are our own, unless otherwise stated, and do not reflect the opinion of KDUX Web Radio, Richland College, or the DCCCD. All right. Let the All Caucasians show commence. Anyways,
Yes,
so guys,
we got rid of all the minorities because
today's
speech.
today's
Speech.
topic is free speech. Let's diversify a little bit. Let's make it a little more versatile. Okay, that's better.
Oh, good. Another white guy.
Finally, somebody who's really blonde.
Add into the fire.
Okay, so I think we're here to talk about Nazis. No.
yes, I am
which did
Adolf
come up.
Hitler back from the dead to speak to you about free speech.
A lot of people back from the dead.
I'm
We have Jay
Adolf.
Stalin
Already
over
testing
here.
the limits of free speech.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. Guys, I just heard we got kicked off.
Oh, we're off the air.
Testing the limits of free speech
That didn't take long.
with the Philosophy Club.
Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, today's topic, if you haven't already guessed, is that of free speech. I'll say this, too. Prior to the Philosophy Club, I had the absolute privilege of hosting a public panel, a roundtable discussion on student activism and Richland College. So what is student activism relative to our home campus here? It was comprised by a number of students and staff and faculty, all of whom, both full-time and part-time faculty, as well as staff whose positions put themselves in direct contact with students and I would say helping to shape student culture at our school. So it's very entertaining. And wonderful questions, wonderful conversation. Very happy to be a part of it. And it spilled over, I would say, directly into the Philosophy Club meeting, where the conversation sort of commenced and I would say got even more in depth. And now here we are to drive it on home. And after this, of course, if you're wondering where our Captain Uche is, he is going to get the popcorn for the final installment in the Philosophy and Film series. The Philosophy Club presents Philosophy and Film. It's the last one for like 5 months, I want to say. We've done one every major month of the semester: November, February, March, and this will be April. It's a documentary.
What categorizes as a major month?
If you want to
The other
minor,
ones don't
We
count.
need equal representation
if you
for
want
minority months.
if you want to minor in years but major in months.
February is not a real month.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like one.
Well, have you looked at the complexion of the panel? February is a real month. It's a very important month. What I mean is and we did one in February. I mean the months that are full on in the semester. So January, it's not really a full major month because.
Every month where classes were held for the full length of the month.
Don't you dare interrupt me on my show.
What?
Free speech. So the point being is this. We're taking it on home. Most bands, when they're ending the set, they like to end with a real rocker, a real hit. We're ending with a ballad, folks. We're ending with a documentary. But nonetheless, it's a rockin', it's a power ballad. It's a power documentary.
It just keeps going.
That has to do with free speech. This time in the zone of comedy and comedic expression. But okay, enough with the plugs. Let's get into this. Well, first of course, introductions. So, I just thought of, we are Thunder Ducks, so we have introductions. Get it? Quack. Please, we'll start at the far end.
Took you 3
Duck
years to
your
get to that one.
puns.
It really isn't that sad? Go for it, John.
John
Stalin.
Stalin. Yeah, John Stalin actually recognized in the paper twice as John Stalin. There we go.
And I am, of course, Adolf Hitler back from the dead.
And I'll be Mark for now.
Oh, hi,
Right.
Mark.
Nice to meet you, Mark.
I'll be Frank. That wasn't funny. Hey,
It was not funny.
Forced laughter.
I'll be Professor Ming.
We need a laugh button so Nancy can
Yeah,
press it
yeah,
after
wait, we
his
don't-
So we can
puns.
satisfy Manzi.
He needs a laugh button.
Usually Uche's my laugh button, but he's not here today. And then who do I have my right here? Who's that guy?
My name is Kalen Scoggins. I'm a adjunct faculty member of the government department here at Richland. As a student on the panel put it today, I'm with the government.
Killen, of course, was one of the panelists. I'm happy to have him. And yeah, guys, fresh off I would say a conversation that was kind of really just starting to rev up, and we had to go. So hopefully we can capitalize on that momentum.
Yes, we were talking about, and we need to continue talking about the Jews.
Oh boy,
Wow.
We got
That's okay,
told
guys.
again, Adolf.
Braden is Jewish. What? So
No,
let's,
sadly, no. This is gonna get me in a lot of trouble.
it's gonna get you in trouble.
Yeah.
Kalen's one who wrote the script beforehand, so think of what.
Yeah, that's true.
That's slander.
Yeah.
I don't think any of your superiors watch this.
You'd be surprised. And now they'll be surprised when they do watch this. So, guys, let's honestly pick up where we left off, because we're making some, all jokes aside, no pun intended. This is obviously a very important issue, very significant issue. Certainly to me, of course. That's why I helped organize the panel on it, and that's why I feel like it deserves not just a fair shake like all of our topics do, but it deserves special consideration, because again, free speech is a hot button issue on our campus right now. And so, student activism is one genre, so to speak, of free speech. How important is it to the students and faculty and staff? And if we learned anything from today's panel, it's everybody agrees that it's important. It's the details that people seem to get a little hung up on. And so I'll ask somebody who, as he said, Vice President of the Philosophy Club over here. You were featured as a student activist in the Chronicle. Were you pleased by that?
Was I pleased by being featured in a newspaper? I mean, not really.
Is all press good press? well, because
I don't like-
it wasn't you. It was your doppelganger,
Yeah, it
John
was my
Stalin.
doppelganger, John Stalin.
But but I mean, I guess what I'm trying to ask you is this: the point of these kinds of demonstrations or exhibitions of student activism are, as Professor Patrick Moore pointed out during the panel, it's designed to create some sort of a spectacle here, which is to say you want to bring awareness to the issue. I mean,
Right.
that's what a protest is.
The point of that protest wasn't necessarily to cause the change right away.
Okay.
It was something more to put the idea into people's mind that change needs to happen. And change can't happen unless we recognize that change needs to happen. So that example of free speech was to open people's minds to not only the issues, but to bring people together in that each one of these people who showed up to this protest, they all kind of know something's wrong, but it just kind of solidifies that we recognize that other people also notice something's wrong. So that element of free speech is a unification of sorts.
Yeah, and so it's very interesting that in affirming your right to free speech, you are engaging in an act of free speech. And what's
Right.
more, it seems funny that maybe not funny, maybe that's not the best term, but it's odd to me at least that students require a demonstration to confirm what they claim should be obvious already.
Right.
Which is that I mean, in that case it was the gun violence, but just in general, your rights, dare I say, your obligation to be not just informed, but I guess united on the same page, not for the sake of necessarily affecting change right away, but for understanding that there's a like-mindedness, that there's a common sort of mindset that is for the common good.
I think when you say free speech, and you just even saying free speech or saying that free speech is something that we need, that means there's an alternative that is present in some kind of way. So then
Interesting.
even identifying that we need free speech kind of recognizes the opposite of restricted freedoms. So that means that there is a problem. So to clarify, freedom means that there is the opposite of freedom.
Right. So the thesis aspect you're bringing up.
Right.
So yeah, and okay. So if I follow you correctly here, and I think I do, the entire who just sighed? Was that you, Kalen?
Oh, sorry.
He fell asleep.
No, and just real quick, props to Kalen. He fought food poisoning to make it to the panel, and
Oh,
some
that
other
sucks.
obligations he had today. So
I'm doing much better now, but I
Good.
still will have sighs every now and then.
that's okay.
We forgive you.
Better than having nunchucks. Raphael,
Am I free to sigh?
Michelangelo, you're free to decide. Hey, that'll do it, folks.
Think about it.
Think about it. Don't think about it. But yeah, John, your point I think is this: it's easy to take free speech for granted when you feel like it's not being threatened, and which is to say, it's easy to take speech for granted when you assume that your speech will be heard, and it's when your speech feels like it's falling on deaf ears that more dramatic exhibitions, actions need to be taken in order to just reaffirm the fact that not only is free speech still there, and that there's still quote unquote ears to hear it and give it expression in the appropriate manners, but also that other people, as you said, recognize and acknowledge it. I mean, you want to talk about rights and stuff like that. I mean, a big aspect of it, and this came up in the panel, is acknowledging that there are certain rights here that deserve to be exercised. I want to get back to the points that were being made right towards the end of the philosophy club session. So we heard from that one student who talked about coming from Uganda and then going from various cultures and various communities and understanding that free speech, in theory is universal, but in practice, especially if you want to get individual about it, is very relative. To again, it's context dependent. It's not just law dependent. It's not just unwritten law dependent. But it requires, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Mark, but it requires, again, as you said, an attuned sense of, I mean, you're calling it reason, but an attuned sense or sensibility of what is and is not both appropriate contextually and just generally right and wrong.
Yeah, because we've seen that everyone has different ways of interpreting a situation. Okay, we see that people can walk away from the same encounter and have different accounts of it. One person could be like, "Wow, he did this," and the other person could literally feel the opposite or say something very dissimilar to that. And then everyone's confused, saying, "Wow, these testimonies don't match up. What's wrong? We can never know for sure." And so it's circumstances like that you have to realize then that any truth that any truth that someone can accept is going to be entirely the way it's accepted and what is accepted is entirely dependent on how the being interprets the information given to them. Okay, that allows them to come to that conclusion. And so, because different environments, okay, that's going to be a different way, different information processing. Okay, not the same information is going to me as it is to you right now. We might be very close in the same room, but still not all the information is still the same. So we're going to have different experiences from there. And so from that, you also have to see that the roadmap of how the information travels through the body or through the brain to arrive at a certain area of conclusion. And it's the differences in those pathways, okay, that will allow someone to reach a different conclusion than someone else. And so because that, it to me, it seems it's so obvious now. And so I love the mirroring image we get when we think of reasoning, of human reasoning as a sense, just not a physical sense, it's an abstract sense. And so, because when you think of it like that, everything makes sense.
Yeah.
And dollars.
Yeah, yeah, big money, and so that's I think the biggest. Like you said before, we see that everyone thinks that there's a problem, and then everyone just generally they don't know what they're trying to do at the point of exchanging their opinions about a problem with another person. All they think is, I'm just going to tell you my differences from what you are, and I'm going to try to convince you otherwise of what you believe, And so it shouldn't be a task of that nature. It should be where two people come together or a group of people and they acknowledge the fact that they are going to have different interpretations of things and that they move from there and then engage with each other in a productive conversation about whatever the nature is that they wanted to discuss. And so what they'll do is they'll exchange how they have interpreted it and why they have interpreted it in a sense of an argument, but a well-structured and calm argument, not one that just yells obscenities and when the loser loses, they, insult the other.
In this time, I guess argument has a bad connotation.
Yeah,
now we
exactly.
have to call it a discussion, right?
Exactly. It's really weird. It's sad.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I like your concluding point there. Are you sticking around?
No, I have to go home.
She just gave me some flyers.
Are you're not staying for the movie?
No, but I'm going
Apparently
to
the
bags for tomorrow
Office
for
of
free.
Student
All right.
Life will have a.
Hiya
an
makes a
issue to put
nice
those up with the wrong
cameo
tape. You
appearance.
need to use masking tape.
Hiya, getting stuff ready for tomorrow's fundraiser, which we will plug later. That's a little teaser. Mark, I like what you said, but earlier you began by talking about being able to access the truth of something. And so if we do concede to this idea that there is a truth with a capital T about something, then these conversations you're talking about seems like, well, ultimately somebody is right or righter.
Right.
So,
Unless right.
So in the end, one might be more right than the other, or they might both have been way off, and then they come to a more right conclusion together. And so it should not be a competition, okay? It should never be thought of as a competition. If I'm trying to win this argument, it shouldn't be that. It's
Yeah.
like we want this argument to be a right argument, and
Yeah.
we want the conclusion not to just be my conclusion, but to be the right conclusion.
Our
And that's, I
conclusion.
think, is the important idea there.
I think
like
that the way that we teach argument from the very basic level of education is that we institute into these kids that kind of the idea of first you start out with a Republican ideal or a Democratic ideal,
Yes, right
and then you
there's
go
the
head to head,
first
and then you
puff.
try to deconstruct the other's argument from there with you already having the conclusion instead
Yes.
of first going about it with
Exactly.
the problem and then building off of that to reach the conclusion.
You
Because
shouldn't-
that's the Socratic form of argument.
Yes.
That's that you build. It's a
Yes, exactly.
conglomerate argument.
Yeah. You don't want to walk into an argument with the plan of what you're going in there with is absolutely true. You should embrace the exchange of ideas with the other person, and if they are different, you should have the ability to separate your own feelings about being wrong technically to be able to look at it from I may have been wrong, but they just brought up a point that is more right. And so I need to have the emotional maturity to accept that what they have is right. And they also need to have the emotional maturity to not get overly excited about being right. You know how some people, it's
Right.
like, they go, I'm right, dude. You suck, you're wrong. Guess what? You're wrong. It's weird.
Yeah.
You're wrong.
Because
I don't
then
do that.
That's when
Exactly.
people identify too much with the ideas that
I-
they're saying. That's when
Yes.
people become the things that they're saying. So then it's a problem of personality, just like with what Kaylin was talking about a while ago in the panel. But he's talking about how with a lot of issues that we come across, we start to identify with the issues instead of with actually finding solutions to the issues.
Yeah.
Again, that was Professor Moore. That wasn't
Yeah,
That wasn't
everybody
you?
keeps giving Caleb
Oh.
props.
I agreed with
It's a good
Professor Moore.
point.
Take it.
Yeah.
It is a really good point. I wish I'd made that point.
Is there
all I could
anything
do-
more to say?
All I could do was agree with it.
Oh, my bad.
Well, but listen, I like what both of y'all are saying. I think there's a lot of truth to it, but just we make it sound so easy. And
Right.
look,
Yeah,
today
exactly.
the panel was really fantastic today because we had 8 people up there from different vantage points relative to their relationship to Richland. But it was a very smooth, very respectful, very encouraging conversation. But most do not occur that way. No, well, granted, that was by design. The selections of people we invited, I thought everybody meshed well. But I mean, it's easy to say you should remove yourself from your emotional impulses and try to look at the things soberly and clearly. But it's those very emotional impulses, those emotional, visceral reactions that got you interested in the first place.
Right.
So it's funny to use that same thing as a springboard, and then later it seems to work as a hindrance.
Well, I mean, the only emotional reactions that come across with issues that we need to talk about are things like pain and things that need not to happen. We don't come to issues because we like the issues. And so then we should use ration to get rid of the pain that the issue is causing.
I think right here we're seeing how what was it we were talking about, that the way we perceive being wrong about something is so humans have such a negative reaction. We hate we hate having accepted a truth and then moving on through life and then realizing what you have accepted as a truth is not true, and that's the emotional reaction of
It's loss of innocence.
your emotional reaction to being honestly a bit of social humiliation in a way, because that's the way people will view the someone changing their idea. If someone changes their idea, then that's them admitting that they were wrong. And so because they admit that they were wrong, everyone then jumps to them, oh, you were wrong. And also they will use it to discredit them. Well, you were wrong about that.
I see, yeah.
Oh,
And
that
so-
happens in politics all the time.
Exactly. So we
I
have
think-
this notion that people can't come from a lesser truth to a more truth, and then we make fun of them for going through the process of switching to a better truth. Now, it's okay to criticize when one goes from one false truth to another false truth, and that's why criticism should always be embraced, but just not there's a mean for it.
And
Why is it so mean?
with politics, it's like just for an example to glue that to. If someone, I mean, this is a really not a terrible example, but I'm not like concrete in what I'm saying.
Of course.
But someone has an idea
Of
of
course. Lucky diss.
No, I just mean that's the way you should approach it.
Yeah.
You
No,
should
yeah.
go into it saying, I don't know what I'm talking about for sure, but
Yeah.
think about it like this.
Uh-huh.
It's very Socratic.
Yeah.
He's addicted to Socrates. He's a
I really am.
Socradict.
You need that laugh button.
Give it up, Kalen. Come on,
Yeah.
buddy.
You got like 2 whole people.
Okay, so thinking about politics, someone will say something and then it'll end up being wrong. And the best way for something positive to happen out of that is for them to be able to say, I said something wrong and I admit that. Now let me find the truth of this matter. But instead what happens is someone like the media will attack this person and then say they were wrong about this. They could have been wrong about everything else that they did in their entire career.
Yeah.
Seems so silly.
And yeah,
it's when you think about it, when you
yeah.
realize what they are actually doing, you
It's-
realize how stupid
it's
it is.
very silly.
When
And
they were 6, they were wrong about where babies came from. How can we question their credibility? How can we not question their
Right.
credibility?
And I think that comes from having these conclusions already in our heads.
Yeah.
And we have this idea that we should have the conclusions immediately because we're such a goal-based society that we look at goals and everything is surrounded around goals.
Love soccer.
Yeah. and to win the game of life, we have to get the things that we're getting at in the goals. We have to get like all the financial success, the big house, the money, all that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that's in the end
Oh,
that
God.
we
I'm
think.
failing miserably in that case. Please
Yeah,
continue.
And I think that's the stuff that we think we're supposed to get to. And if we could just skip that whole process of getting all those things, then we will have won the game immediately. And now we can retire young and then play golf and then drink a little bit, but not too much to where you can't play golf tomorrow morning and do that same thing over and over again, you know. That's
Exactly.
true happiness, you know.
I think that's true. I think Steve Young is retired. I'm sorry, Mark. You want to say something?
Oh yeah. What?
Oh yeah, but I was
repeat
talking
what-
about
repeat what you
so
just
that
said.
that has
Yeah.
to do with conclusions being
Yeah.
being what we think is the main process of life is that we have to have conclusions because that's the
Yes.
end of the goal.
That's an interesting conclusion.
This goes along with the. So you say in life, you always want to achieve, what you want, okay? And if what you want, how to get there the fastest way is being right about all the steps that you take to get there.
Yeah.
And so it's really, you don't want to admit first off, admitting that you were wrong is acknowledging that you're on a lower level than you once were, okay? And so people don't like being lowered in levels like that because
Really,
they
though?
they get so uncomfortable. I mean, you try to do it to anyone, they will get uncomfortable. If it's about an important topic, and they
Okay, I mean, I won't.
Yes,
Unless
so-
you're telling me something like, you're wrong about who you think your mother is or something like that. Then I might get a little, irritated. Hey,
what I was trying to get at is that the reason we don't like
dong ditch?
being wrong, or yes, the reason we don't like being wrong is because generally being wrong takes away from our advancement towards what we want. And so that's also we take that association and then apply it everywhere where even also being wrong, generally you get harmed if being wrong. In the physical world,
Right.
you make a decision, there's consequences. But we're dealing here with abstract,
Things that won't
arguments.
hurt you if
so
you're
exactly.
wrong.
So we're allowing the effect of the physical actions have to carry over into the effect and applying it to how abstract makes us feel. And it seems silly, but once you identify it, you have an extreme ability to change it.
yeah, but Mark, keep in mind, Socrates almost says the complete opposite. Socrates says, when you engage somebody in dialogue, and in your sort of genuine conversation understanding of it, where it's not, you're not using facts and stats to weaponize yourself because you're going to war verbally or something like that. When you're genuinely concerned with trying to seek out additional, deeper understandings of a topic of your
The
choice,
truth.
if you want to call it that, yeah. At the very least, Socrates says if you leave the conversation being wrong, it means you leave the conversation with something you didn't have before the conversation. If the other person leaves the conversation being proven right, that person hasn't gained anything.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I just meant that the way we interpret being wrong is it's okay to be wrong, is what I'm saying. And so it's
I
because
gotcha.
we learn from the mistakes, is what I'm saying.
Right.
And so, but because we have such a negative feeling towards being wrong because of all of our other, I would say primitive associations with the feeling of being wrong. That is why we get this feeling. I embrace being wrong, and it's really hard. You realize to actively, like, if anyone ever points out something that you did or said that wasn't like the most right thing to say, or it was a bit off, it's really difficult to always be like, you were right.
Like
that
all our
was not
jokes at the
yeah.
beginning of this.
Everyone just
podcast.
what they tend to do instead will just go, haha, whatever, But right then they skip. They skip.
Yeah, sure
Yes.
thing, Mark.
They skip over
We got you, Mark.
the process of realizing what they did wrong. Because they don't want to admit that they don't want. They just I can just not even admit that there was a problem, and I can avoid the
Yeah,
the
and
fact of being
again, I
wrong.
think that's a problem with identifying with the ideas that we're putting
Mhm.
forward, is that we connect our emotional being to
Yes.
the things that we do and the things that we say. And I mean, you are a collection of the things that you do in a product of your environment, but still, you don't have to identify with the idea that you're putting forth. The mark of an educated mind is to be able to entertain an idea without accepting it, right? So, so to form this idea and let it be not, I guess, let it be carved with many hands as opposed to just with your own
Exactly,
to create
yes.
the best idea possible.
And you want to know why that works so well? Is because guess what? You're taking different viewpoints of different experiences that experienced all different
Right.
information, and then you're
Yeah.
consolidating it
So-
more within
so
yourself,
you're getting
which
a-
allows you
A camera angle from
more
all
angles,
around,
yes.
not just
That's
from
I
one.
like that.
Yeah.
But
I feel
but
like we're kind of getting away from the issue here.
well, yeah, and we are. But
See,
let me just say one thing here. Why couldn't you? And this is a real question I have because I don't know. Why couldn't you commit to something that at the time you believe in, with the understanding that you could be wrong, and then you can personally self-identify with whatever change comes as a result of you realizing that maybe you were short-sighted or inexperienced or something like that.
I mean, you totally can, and that's
Yeah.
like that's the right way to do it, and that's like
Thank you.
that's at the healthy level of where if you're personally at that level of being able to have that sense of inner reflection on whether being able to accept what you're saying could either be wrong or is wrong right now and embrace the change. When you see those characteristics in individuals, you realize that they have a more developed, I don't know, do we want to call it ability to reason?
You should. I'm flattered, so thank you.
But so I think that so when you see everyone else doing the opposite of that, or not everyone else, okay, I'm sorry, whenever you see some people acting that way, it's about not convincing them that they're wrong. It's just about helping them realize that, hey, look, the way you're thinking of it is not right. You allow yourself to accept truths that you do not know now
Yeah, and you just
and turn from yours.
as you said, you can't look at it as a loss.
Mhm.
You have to look at it as a gain.
But then, who are you to say I'm looking at it wrong? You could be looking at it wrong.
Exactly.
But that's what typically happens during those
Yeah.
conversations. It's like, well, I guess that's your opinion then.
Yeah,
And
It-
then
it's
that's
about-
it just shuts down there.
Yeah. Whenever you get to that point, you have to go about analyzing what is most reasonable, because that is your ability. Whenever you analyze something based on the grounds of it being reasonable or not, or how probable or the most reasonable. Okay, that is how you get to a more clear conclusion.
Right.
Because then you'll go back over your steps and realize, wow, that step wasn't as reasonable as I thought it was. But because I suggested it, and we just, didn't question it right away, because that's okay. That's not as right as I thought it was. So then you go back to that, and then you fix that little portion where your rationality wasn't perfect, and then you will see an advancement of more understanding of it. And then it's a process. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back every time. So like the step back allows you to take 2 steps forward and cover your ground again, because now it might have taken away your standing of being right, but what it also did was add to your experience and understanding of what is true. So then, that 2-step forward, right after you take that, once you get to that next level, you're going to reach a point where you have to take another step back and be wrong about something or change something.
Sounds like the dialectic.
Yeah, it does sound like the dialect, and I think that's excellent. But again, it sounds so great in theory. But what if that doesn't match concrete reality? What if everybody in your world is telling you some sort of, I don't know, sexist truth or racist truth, and you interact with people of whatever that sex is or that race is, and it actually that small sample size confirms those prejudicial quote unquote truths.
Are we
So-
going
so
to
that's a logical fallacy.
So at that point, you have to rely on your individual
Yes!
sense of reason.
React.
When everyone is telling you, just be
That's too much to
a popular truth does not mean it's the perfect truth. Okay, just because a truth is accepted.
Unless you hear good things about me. Yeah.
the what was that?
Perfect
Einstein
truth.
said something like
That
that.
man's
Well,
is
like
perfect.
the popular truth is not always the right truth. Okay, and
Sorry,
so
time to pause.
your ability to your ability to differentiate between what is more right or more reasonable and less reasonable, like Socrates says, lies within the individual. Okay, and so that everyone else could be telling you something wrong, and then you have the ability. You still have the ability of reason simply by being a human. It's simply about acknowledging the use and embracing the use of it.
I want to look
So-
at something like that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So tying it back into free speech, if it's okay to be wrong, does that mean you should be free to say wrong things or to make false statements, objectively false statements, but that you believe to be true?
So yes, in that case, one we have to separate the two categories. I think of being wrong. One where you're wrong deliberately, and then being wrong in ignorance. Okay, simply. If we're having a conversation and then I say something that offends you because
Right.
let's say that's how I was brought up. If you have an initial, negative reaction to it, I didn't do it on purpose to hurt you, okay? It was not done with malicious intent, okay? So at that point, we should not, the person that was wrong should be respected. They are respected, and you don't want to limit their future sayings just
Right.
because of being wrong that one time. If they acknowledge, oh, wait, really, that's not right? And then you explain to them why it's not right, and then they can come to a conclusion that they were not right. And then you have the other category where people are intentionally either they seem to ignore available evidence to them, and because they don't want to look at it and go through the process of analyzing all the different parts of it and then coming to a proper understanding. What they just want is the first part of it that they encounter is what they're gonna hop onto. Okay, they're gonna want to avoid the work because it's so taxing to go through this process, because you see what's happening. We're going through a very vigorous process where we are all
Right.
trying to help each other get to the point of understanding that each individually we all have come to, and that individual conclusion that we all are formulating right now is so different, because right now we have the reason or the information or reasoning that we're using to formulate our own individual conclusions is all separate, because we've done our own research, we've done our own discussions, we've had different discussions, we've had discussions with different people, we've had discussions with same people, etc. So that's another element to it. And so whenever you're thinking about the idea of free speech, like I said, with the a defect of a physical sense, okay, a defect in the of one of the body's abstract senses, in reason, it will cause a person to find unreasonable things reasonable and accept it as reasonable.
Can we talk about this defect in reasoning?
Yes.
Because I do not believe that people actually do have an issue with the defect in reasoning, unless there's the rare exception that someone is truly mentally insane.
Right.
So
I think
either the defect is caused by a lacking environment, a lack of stimulating environment, or a lack of initiation of interaction with an environment that would allow reasoning to flourish.
Also, let's look at the syllogism. So, I could say a syllogism it's completely wrong. But it follows reason. I say all birds are blue.
Yeah.
Those
are little paradoxes.
Mark is a bird.
I mean, I don't know
and then,
how.
Mark must be blue. So
Okay,
then,
well, so that'd be
that
valid but
follows
not sound.
reasonably. Yeah, valid but not sound. So then, all these things that we start with could be completely wrong, and the reason ends up being wrong, and then it looks like the reason's wrong, but it
But
really
the reasoning
is
is not wrong. Rather, the basis for the reasoning is wrong.
The
someone
premises
can,
are false.
Yes, someone can have a false
Yeah.
perception, which gives them a false premises, which leads them to an incorrect conclusion. But that does not mean they have a defect in their reasoning.
Well, we just said that they reached a non true conclusion. Okay, right there, we could say that there was a problem with their process of reasoning. Okay.
No, it'd be a problem
no,
with
there's
judgment.
a problem with with their initial starting point,
But
not
then-
with the
No,
process.
I don't know if it
They
should be said as
they
the starting
start
point.
with the
Anyone
wrong
can-
premise. They start with the wrong
Anyone
idea.
can start with a different
And then
premise and then embrace the idea of new premises. It's just about
Fascinating stuff.
what did I want to?
Okay, let me get a
Yeah.
word in edgewise there. I want to ask you, Mark, because you guys are having a great conversation. You really are. But all of this implies that the truth is something worth striving for. What is the function of truth in your understanding here? Because getting back to something you said a few minutes ago, it reminded me of Montaigne and this whole idea of, again, truth is for the sake of convenience. So you'll accept the truths that make your life easier to live. And if you have a reason to doubt them, or you can't decide which truth is more truthy, if everybody's making sound arguments, if everybody's making persuasive arguments, it's easier to just go with the tide. And, that's truth relative to your relationship. Case in point, it's difficult to be an activist. And a number of the panelists had mentioned something along these lines, namely Melanie Pruitt and Kelly Soderstein. Because it requires you to put yourself out there. It requires you to potentially be wrong, to be embarrassed, or have your name be besmirched by others. It's very inconvenient to do any of the things we're talking about doing, which is to say, to do anything that free speech empowers you to do. You take these risks, and you do so for. I mean, I keep
In
hearing
hope of others doing the same.
Well, I keep hearing, you do it because the truth of what's right and wrong. But I just wonder if that is justifiable in and of itself.
What, finding the truth?
Yeah.
Is it not worth knowing? I mean, what if
Is it?
I mean, we can.
what
I'm
knowing the
speaking
truth allows
pragmatically
knowing what is most true allows for
Ease of mind?
whatever being is knowing if they know more of what is most true, okay, they will have a greater ability of survival in
Really?
in situations. When I say survival, I don't mean like necessarily life and death, but I mean a more likelihood of flourishment in any situation, of success in any situation, because they have the proper understanding of how relations are between
In your environment.
between things. Yes, they have the ability to identify the actual differences and variations between differences in environment that cause. Also,
So the more you know your environment, the better master of the environment you become.
yes, because you have the ability to control
Truth for the
what your
sake of
body-
mastery?
Yeah.
Professor Manzi is
Well, I mean, I would say
using an
truth
interesting
for the-
rhetorical trap on you just there.
Going back to
About the
how you
framing of the
said,
question.
going back to how you talked about, you can say something that sounds perfectly reasonable, but then in logic or whatever, it seems not true. What we're seeing there is an interesting phenomenon of just language and how the different ways that ideas and things are thought of and represented within the communication between beings, is an important part of it. And I think that because you think in the language that you know, do you not? So imagine if you think in more
I don't think in a language I don't know.
exactly. And so imagine a deaf person thinking. They would do they think in ideas, abstract thoughts? Do they think in they don't know English, like in my head I'm thinking I want an ice cream
do
sandwich,
know
and in my
English.
head I hear I want an ice cream sandwich, So if these people of different mediums of communication, you see differences in their ability to or in the way they think.
I think what Professor Manzi was getting at was, is truth good in itself, or
yes.
is it only good for some other
For the
benefit
use of
that
it,
that
for
it
the
provides
use
you?
that it has to you.
Right. Of course, but the way he phrased it as what's the function of truth presumes one answer over the other.
Was it Socrates says something really
Does it?
similar, right? Where
I
he
don't-
goes,
not necessarily.
or who says that? Where they said, is
Not if you're rhetorically savvy enough.
the good virtues good just for the sake of them? Like, is happiness good just for the sake of happiness? Okay, that was a topic of discussion where we realized that yes, happiness is valuable just for the sake of being happy. Okay, no other reason.
Like
It's-
art and
yeah, and so
aesthetic.
same for the idea of living. Living is just for the sake of living.
You had enough? Oh, sit down. All right, Braden has something he wants to say.
No,
Go for it.
Free speech.
Yeah.
Free your speech.
I want to get back to freedom of speech, which we've left behind quite a while.
Not in a sense, because we've just taken
We're
the
speaking
abstract
freely.
idea.
Wait, he wants to talk. He wants to
Go-
talk.
go ahead. No.
Braden, talk. Come on, Braden. Are you really leaving? Yeah. Okay. That's a performative contradiction to everything you just said.
Abdicating. Does one have the right to abdicate?
That's
freedom of
true.
speech?
That's fair. That's fair.
I didn't
Anyways.
even give me a signal, or did he want to say something? I didn't. He could have tapped me on the.
Oh yeah. I think we were
No, I'm
bouncing
looking at the
back and
screen.
forth too hard, and like everything was kind of in a
Might have been
soup.
ping-ponging a bit. Yeah, I didn't realize he had something you wanted to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, Braden, please come back. Feel free to say anything you'd like.
A lot of people
Braden,
tend
come
to
back.
think
Braden, come back.
at this point in natures of conversation where you've gotten into abstract ideas of certain topics, you realize that you're not using the actual words of the original topic. But that's because the actual, you're dealing with the abstract complications of that topic. And so you don't want to use those exact words because, again, it could cause misunderstandings. And
Yeah,
that's
no,
why-
you're fine. You didn't do anything wrong. Mark.
Okay. I got.
It is kind of
very
ironic
confused.
that we just had a walkout
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
middle of this conversation that was inspired by walkouts. Now, is there a difference between Braden's walkout and the student walkout?
I think so.
How so?
Because I think the student walkout was to demonstrate something, and I think Braden's walkout was just that he was just fed up and just left.
Yeah, I acknowledge I have a tendency to. What happens is
You say you lack knowledge?
No,
Oh, you
what I have
act
I have a tendency. What I've realized is that whenever I say something, when I hear generally someone's response, I realize that what was it? I've already gone through that process, and I just haven't made my point perfectly clear, and so I feel the need to go back then and re-explain it in a better way. But then the process just ends up going back and forth,
Yeah.
2 steps forward, 1 step back. But
Well, yeah, this also okay, and that's fair. I mean, you're just trying to be as precise as possible. I get
Right.
that. It's also kind of curious though, is that I think this just illustrated something very common to these kinds of things, free speech in general, is that free speech, some will argue, tends to rest with whichever voice is the loudest.
Right.
So
yeah, that tends to be it because the mob mentality forms.
That's
Yes.
why we have charismatic leaders.
And
Yeah.
globalization seems to be inflaming that the mob mentality, or the human ability to have a mob mentality. Because more globalization means more people are connected with more people, meaning if one person has an idea, it's more likely to spread to others.
Right.
So that we're seeing an effect of a small effect from globalization, in a sense that you see the influence of ideas that people then accept as true, and then it's all
Right.
about just arguing with each other about the two most popular mediums of thought, Democrat and Republican. It's because they're the most popular that anyone accepts them as true. I promise you, if we had no conceptualized groupings of proper values, and virtues, that people would have a better chance of finding it themselves, But what they see is a Republican and Democrat on the TV, and they go, that one is being louder than that one. That one's getting laughed at because he just totally dunked on that one. So this guy seems more reasonable because
He's a
he's getting the
stronger
best
leader.
feedback. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
a stronger leader in all this.
It's the confusion of rhetoric for reason.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right.
And it's also the grouping of one who is even just a little bit different from you in a whole, in the opposite category of completely wrong, in the extreme sense of the opposite,
I mean, this is how this can tie back to free speech, because this is could we block logical fallacies? Would that be something that's reasonable in something like political debates? Would it be could that be ethical to block logical fallacies? Where if someone has a logical fallacy, then it's like a game show, and you say, "Oh, that's a logical fallacy." You get one.
That
vote
would be
taken
really
away.
nice. Oh
That'd
my
be kinda
gosh, if we
fun.
just had, a panel that
Mhm.
just anytime, if politicians were debating and one just said something so outlandish, in hopes of getting the upper foot in the argument, that the panel could just go, "Hey, that was not reasonable. That was you got away from the point."
Yeah.
That
You
seems
felt
very
a need to grab onto other sources of,
seems very contrary to
ammunition.
the way you were presenting free speech earlier.
Yeah.
How so?
Well, so now we're in favor of having a panel moderate.
Oh no,
and
that was a
and
joke. I mean, that
monitor
would be
people.
really weird.
That would be super
no,
weird.
okay,
But I
so-
mean, in the game show format that we have society now, might be like the easiest way to get people to speak rationally.
Yeah, and it also it's a nice way of introducing the idea of, or it's the beginning, I think, or their
Yeah.
best way of receiving the idea. Okay, but when we talk about what or if parts of free speech should be censored, it's like, I guess it's like trying to prevent people from seeing, bad or wrong colors. Okay, it's like trying to cure color blindness. Okay, but it's a different way of doing that because you have more control over your ability of reason than you do your ability to see colors. Right? You know?
Yeah, but just keep in mind, guys, when we could talk about censorship, it's supposed to be in the service of free speech. And so it's not as though free speech and censorship are necessarily at odds. I mean, certain things must be censored in order for other things to be able to be said.
Right. That's protecting the underdog.
Well, if any particular kind of expression enjoys absolute protection, then other kinds must necessarily not.
Exactly.
Yeah, nothing should be free from criticism.
Well, do you think nowadays certain things are very free from criticism?
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
ration is not
Beyonce is
free
one
from
of them.
criticism.
Beyonce, you cannot criticize because you will get crucified on Twitter or wherever you said the.
Well, there's
so do-
yeah. I'm
Also,
sorry, go for it.
go ahead.
that's interesting. I want to point out that this is kind of way off topic, but it kind of goes with a being's ability to have influence. That how weird the modern day celebrity status is when you think of it in terms of if anyone had this thought of a celebrity, during say Mayan times, it would be thought godlike. They worship them as literal gods. They have sacrifices of their money. They sacrifice their time. They're traveling to go see their shows, and then they defend them, without fault on any circumstance possible. And then they have posters in their room constantly, and they like pray to them even sometimes.
Right.
And it's really weird.
It's super weird.
It's really weird.
I'll sign that poster for you if you want. I think I just think it's important to keep in mind that it's easy to be on the same page generally, and it's very difficult to be on the same page in terms of specifics, in terms of concrete particulars. And this idea of free speech and its importance, it's very easy to get behind. But then how you actually spell that, how it spells itself out, rather, through us and how we act and how we restrain ourselves, that's where the rubber hits the concrete. And so something like that happened recently here on campus with the student activism, the peaceful protest. It was organized. It happened. Students got to express themselves in a way that the entire campus took note of, and more collectively, the entire nation took note of, and Richland's part in it, I suppose. That's all fine and dandy, but you have to realize most of the time, free speech does not end up like that. Like the results are far less civil.
Oh yeah, exactly. So it's all about, well, how do we fix the problem? And I've spent like days going, it's not possible. After I log off Twitter, one day I go, it's not possible. I thought it was possible yesterday. It's definitely not possible today. It's really discouraging when you see all the examples of the opposite happening. And it's so scary. Ugh, it gives me like general anxiety, honestly. I just think about it. But
No, I think it's fair. But just to throw this up there for consideration, we're running out of time. We only got about maybe 10 minutes left, not even. But is Papa Pronk coming in, or is Pronk Pops?
Pronk Pops?
He's the guy who's supposed to be here at 4. Maybe he's not. Sometimes he doesn't come till 4:30.
Okay.
But we have that movie at
That'd be
4:30.
cool.
And at any rate, yeah, I want to get back to this idea of if one voice isn't heard, then none of the voices should be heard. This idea of, again, being willing to listen and being willing to advocate for oneself to get to the point where one's position is acknowledged as something worthy of respect, worthy of being heard. That in and of itself, I think, requires more of a social acknowledgement.
Well,
yes,
is
absolutely.
what someone says, is it important just because you have to respect what everybody says all the time, or should there be some sort of hierarchy to what is important to say and what is important to have freedom to say?
the standard would be logic, it would seem.
Well, think about it like this. In the terms of the analogy of the colorblindness again, whenever a human has color blindness, okay, they're gonna or any defect that makes them make decisions on something that is not true. Okay, you're gonna see
Well,
them.
hang on, again, that's a big.
Or, well, I mean, okay, well, what they're doing is what you want to do, okay, when it comes to how you go about censoring some parts of free speech and then encouraging others. You look towards what is what goes with the flourishment and or the success of the body and health of the mind and body, okay, and then what is what deteriorates it, okay, what takes away from it. Like if one does it's so crazy because there's another mean right here. There's a mean where I guess if you determine what is good or bad based on how the body's affected by it or the mind's healthiness, etc., you're going to find those who are affected by it severely or over dramatizing the effect it has on it. And so those instances have to be acknowledged as a overreaction and a overindulgence of the ability to be offended. It's about the right application of offense, being offense.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Offended. This is the perfect mean.
But that means that there's something fun about being offended then.
Yeah.
There's something I get out of it. If someone's like, oh, I like that, then I'm being offended.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, there definitely is, because you identify as something, you have.
Yeah, it's so hard though.
It's protecting yourself. Is that I'm offended? You've done this to me.
Yeah.
You know.
And then it's
or
I'm right, you're wrong.
patting yourself on the back for being like, that doesn't even apply to me, but I'm still offended.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
That's how
Yeah.
rational I am.
Uh huh.
Yeah.
That's how
That's how
colorblind
they'll
I
tell
am.
them.
Vicariously offended.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Vicariously offended.
My nieces. I think, and I think this. I would say segues well into the movie that we're going to see, the documentary. Can we take a joke? Again, there's going to be a lot of offensive material in this documentary, but this documentary is on Canopy. It's considered public domain for educational purposes for a reason, because it tests your limits of what's offensive. I mean,
You think there are going to be any walkouts from that movie?
it depends if Braden wants to do commentary.
Oh.
I'm joking. Braden, I love
Hey.
you, buddy. I hope you come back. And look, we'll get rid of this kid, Mark. It's fine. He's
Just throw me out.
I'm joking. But I will say this about Braden. I remember being an undergrad in philosophy club and having that feeling so many times and just wanting to get up and walk out.
Oh yeah.
So it's that's what it is to be passionate. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully he does join us for the movie. Uche's here with the popcorn.
Uche.
Anyways, yeah, I think I think it has to do with the You want? Hey, Braden's back. I think it has to do with the following. Essentially, the idea that everybody deserves a right to speak and express themselves, I think, is very easily defended. I think it's very easily argued against, but more so difficult to argue against in a democracy, and the kind of even the funny sort of quasi-democracy we have, or version of democracy we have. But
Puppet show.
but having said that, it's also very easy to put the kibosh on something. I'll give you an example. When I was an undergrad, my freshman year of college, I lived across the hall from a foreign exchange student from Germany. We actually called him Germany because that's how brilliant we were. And so he wanted to start a club at it was basically a Roman Catholic college out in New England. And he did this as a joke because he knew what the response would be. He went to Student Life and said, I'd like to start CC and then the initials of the college, Communistic Community, blah, blah, blah. And they looked at him and basically just like, no, you're not allowed to do that. And he didn't have any real expectation. He literally did it just for a joke.
Was this the 90s?
This was 2001? No, 2002. This was 2002.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's
and
like
so-
now I could probably start a communist club
Oh,
if I wanted
definitely.
to here. Yeah.
At least I think. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. Ask Kelly.
A public institution, yeah. But the one you're talking about is a private institution.
Yes, and yeah, exactly. It was a private institution.
Oh,
so
okay,
they,
that's
yeah,
fine,
they could
yeah.
do this. But the point is being able to anticipate that reaction is one of those things where I think nowadays one would be very surprised by that reaction, as opposed to, say, not surprised at all. In fact, going for the reaction. And I think that's because this, which is what?
That reminds me of this thing, John Mulaney, you know, the comedian?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, he was like, when I was a kid, kids didn't have rights at all. One time I walked into a grocery store and this woman was like, nope, get out. And he was like,
That's a great
all right.
One of the funniest comics right now. In my
Yeah.
opinion. It's well, the whole point is this: is that in this current contemporary climate of, I would say, hyper tolerance and I suppose pluralism is the technical term for it. This idea that diversity is a virtue, and I truly believe it is, and I think most people do. But it does kind of muddy the waters in terms of everybody getting on the same page for something that sounds right at first blush, but then it's tough to actually lay it out. That's why the debate we had here with was it Brian Miranda and then Andrew Castilla, who's for the Chronicle. And Brian, of course, is president of the debate club. They were debating on this issue regarding DACA. It was so beautiful because they were coming from two different places, as these debates are. But it becomes less beautiful when you add more cooks into the kitchen, add more
Yeah.
ingredients to the sauce. I mean, we were very fortunate today. We had 8 people up on the panel and never got Braden-esque. It's a joke. There was no walkouts or anything like that. Everybody was more or less, rational because they were more or less on the same page, even when it came to specifics. But it's easy for us to sit here and say, no, all of these niche disenfranchised minority groups deserve a voice, so long as, they're not harmful.
Yeah, I think a perfect way to sum up what your original thought was to say that people have a right to speak their mind, but they also have a responsibility in what that speaking, what effect that speaking will have, and whether it is a good or a negative effect, whether it's a positive or a negative effect.
I'll defend to the death your right to say it, even if I don't agree.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's that idea.
So I think it's perfectly encapsulated as that, as a human, you might have power and a right to do a lot of things, but because of that power that you have, it also comes with the responsibility of how you use it, whether you use it to promote truth and acceptance of truth and the encouragement of individualistic thought and acceptance of on the road to truth, and I forget what I'm saying halfway through. I forget the original. What did I say?
I think though when you say truth, it's something that kind of just gets in my head because like we were talking about postmodernism and the misconceptions about postmodernism about how there's no more truth anymore, that everything is relative. And I think there's a big movement of a bunch of people, especially like not saying that everybody should be Christian or anything, but like there's a lot of this atheist movement is growing, and I feel like that's the nihilist movement kind of growing, is that you reach that first level of nihilism, and then it's like, oh, there's no truth, nothing is real, everything is just a hoax, and then you kind of get to the Ubermensch afterwards. But I feel like a lot of people
stop there because because it's like, oh, well then what's the point of everything?
right.
There's no right or wrong, so I have the right to do
There's no
whatever I want.
truth, yeah.
I have the right to live my life as crappy and as distasteful to anyone else and as harmful as to anyone else because it's my right. That's like saying, because people say, I have a right to live, my life. So if you have a right to live your life, what if you live your life and kill someone? Is that your right? I mean, do you have a right to kill someone? I mean, that's a little...
What was that accent you were doing earlier?
That's the stupid person.
Oh, jeez. Wow. The phones are lighting up, folks.
And so, it's just about it's about the use of your rights to the what did I say?
So the best truth you were talking about to grow to the best
and then
thing.
But just keep in mind that you
could
could still have logic and not
and not truth, because
Yes.
logic
Yeah.
is the progression in order to get to the most truthful truth. Truth is the conclusion.
the most truthful truth.
Was it because you were talking about how people don't accept truth sometimes, or what was it? Oh man, I'm trying
Some people don't accept truth because
What is
it
it?
conflicts with what they
to
want,
forget.
I guess.
Because it's inconvenient sometimes.
Yeah, because I mean, truth, like you said, truth is whatever is most convenient to believe.
An inconvenient truth.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not what truth is, because, like, from a philosopher's perspective, truth is not what's most convenient.
It's what's most
it's
true.
what
is
the world
most
as it is. Yeah.
What most what
To say
is-
of what is that it is and what
Yeah.
it is not that it is not.
what is the most is. Yeah.
Don't clap for me. That was Aristotle.
All right, guys, shout out Aristotle.
Aristotle's living through.
Let's wrap up. 'Cause we got the film screening in about 12 minutes,
All right.
and I say some shout outs real quick here. Well, first of all, I'll say this. You are listening to KTUX Radio, broadcast live from Richland College in Dallas, Texas. We're the voice of Richland College. RC. Views expressed on this show are our own, unless otherwise stated, or not stated for Braden.
Nothing is as a conclusion,
And do not reflect the opinion of KDUX Radio, Richland College, or the DCCCD. Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow afternoon we have a fundraiser. Philosophy Club is collaborating with Park, which is Pride at Richland College, for a tie-dye fundraiser.
Cost $10.
It costs $10. You can tie-dye a shirt outside on the front lawn with us. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're splitting the quote-unquote profits down the middle. When I emailed everybody about this originally, I spelled tie-dye D-I-E. Some weird, morbid Freudian slip. Anyways, that's not how you spell it. Here it is. These are all around campus. You've probably already seen them. If not, here you are, seeing it again. Wednesday, 25th of
Looks
April,
like this from far away.
11 to 2.
and really blurry.
If you have bad vision.
Please come by. I would love to get reimbursed for the copyright cost of showing a movie 2 months ago that 13 people came to. Anyways, any final thoughts, or do you want to get out of here? And that's really the only plug I have, but I want to make sure I give it a solid plug. Oh, I'm sorry. I do have one more plug. A week from today, May 1st, in Brazos Gallery, 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, in lieu of a traditional Philosophy Club meeting, the Philosophy Club will be convening in Brazos Gallery.
Is that the last one?
That's it depends whether or not we want to meet during finals week, which is up to you guys.
Okay, I kind of do.
We usually do every year. I always leave it up to the students, and I always assume nobody's going to want to, and then we always end up doing it, which is
I
great.
remember it was really big last semester.
Yeah, it was a huge one.
Yeah.
I want to say, isn't it Uche's birthday or something?
Oh, maybe.
Like that week.
I want to do something like really big, like death. Like I want to. I feel like we should talk about. I mean, that's also the end of like the philosophy club for the
Yeah,
semester.
sure.
It's dying, so
Well,
maybe we
okay.
could talk about that. Not that it's dying. I mean, like if you death and rebirth. Who knows?
It'll be on life support
State
after all
of
the officers
consciousness
leave.
after death.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So yeah, we can entertain. Because usually you're right. We usually pick a topic that's like appropriate for the last topic for a while. Like we've done philosophy. Like what is philosophy in the past? What did we do last semester? The last one. I don't even remember.
Education, wasn't it?
I think that was the first one this semester.
Don't get me started on education.
Yeah. What was the
We'll go
one?
off the wall.
I can't remember. Go back and check it out. Shout out season 3, episode 13, season 3 finale. Anyways, I guess that'll do it, folks. You were listening to KDOX Radio. I've already said that. I want to test myself and see if I have it memorized. I don't think I do. I mean, listen, guys. I'm literally reading a disclaimer.
Hey, man,
Which-
before we cut off, make sure they know what radio they're listening to.
yeah.
Probably pretty important.
And our disclaimers.
Yeah.
No, guys, this was just a rehearsal. I didn't actually. None of this is recorded. So just saying how Mark would work out.
We're testing him out.
But literally, I have to read a disclaimer to ensure my right to free speech and making sure that nobody else is liable. That whatever I say on here, again, the school isn't liable.
I mean, it's kind of like you have to say caution, coffee hot on hot coffee.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. You're making sure they're aware of the perhaps extreme state of the characteristics, either physical,
Right.
i.e., hot, or abstract, of either free speech. It's whether.
I.e. truth.
Yeah.
There's-
All right,
from a
guys.
legal perspective, you have to
Well,
take into account stupidity.
when the conversation's over, there's nothing left to say. All you can do is think about it. Have a good one, y'all. See you guys next Tuesday.